Today, we're working on moving from quiet quitting to actively engaging. Welcome to Working On It, the podcast that helps you navigate the complexities of today's work environment. I'm Lauren Spearman, brand consultant and advocate for care and transparency at work.
And I'm Molly Johnson-Jones, CEO and co-founder of Flexa. Lauren and I are here to provide you with practical advice, insightful discussions, and expert guidance on how to thrive in your career.
In this episode, we're tackling a phenomenon that's affected many workplaces: the journey from quiet quitting to rediscovering workplace passion. We'll explore what causes disengagement, how to recognise it, and most importantly, how to reignite that spark.
We'll also discuss practical strategies from both employees and managers to foster genuine engagement and create meaningful work experiences. Plus, we'll share some stories of people who've transformed their relationship with work.
Quick thanks to our episode sponsor, more on them later.
So,
Molly, have you ever quietly quit?
I have.
Oh.
I remember distinctly quiet quitting. So I think that there are three types of quiet quitting. One comes from laziness, the other necessity, and the other is opportunism.
Okay.
So the laziness one, pretty self-explanatory, right? The necessity, I think, stems from having a very, very bad experience in work, wanting to leave and not necessarily having something else lined up and trying to line something up while you're mentally checking out. And the opportunism side of things, I do think there are people that will do the bare minimum for as long as they can before they get found out or recognised.
Yeah. I feel like we should probably backtrack a little and actually define what quiet quitting is first before we go a little bit further into those.
We should. So I think, quiet quitting has very much been something that's been created by the media to explain a phenomena that has probably existed since forever. But ultimately what quiet quitting means is somebody mentally becoming more disengaged with the company, less, they're probably pushing themselves less hard, they're not trying to progress in their career. It's very much like doing the bare minimum and sort of coasting, for lack of a better term. And I think coasting is basically exactly what quiet quitting used to be known as.
Yeah, because it's not, quiet quitting doesn't even necessarily mean you're getting to the point where you're quitting.
No.
You're just pulling back.
You're just pulling back. And I think in the second type of quiet quitting, where it's necessity, you are seeking to quit, but you haven't quite got there yet. I remember quiet quitting out of necessity, actually. I was working for a relatively small company. I was a consultant at this time. I think I might have told this story before, actually, but then there is the quiet quitting element to it. So I was a consultant and I wanted to be promoted to a senior consultant. They'd said no and that I wasn't ready for that. I disagreed. I one day was working on a client bid and I was given all of the costings of people in a spreadsheet, and they were charging me out and had been for the whole time I've been working there, 2 clients as a senior consultant.
The little bastards.
And so to the people where it's most important to be perceived as a senior consultant, they were happy to charge me out as and say I was. But to me, no, I wasn't ready. So after I found that out, I then
Did you address that with them directly?
No.
Just silenced?
I couldn't be asked, in all honesty. And I think that is what drives some of this quiet quitting phenomenon.
I think sometimes there's an awareness that you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, do you want to put that energy into fighting something that you're never going to win, or do you use it and take it somewhere else?
Yeah, so I went from working really hard, always looking for extra work, always looking to be able to pick up like development opportunities. Did that solidly for about 12 to 18 months. And then as soon as I saw that, and I then went and looked at other spreadsheets to make sure that it wasn't just a mistake, and they'd just been consistently doing it. And so I just gave up.
When you then handed in your notice, was it a surprise?
So the gap actually, and maybe in hindsight, I didn't handle this brilliantly, but I was 24, 25, I think. You don't have an enormous amount of career maturity to know how it impacts the team, how it impacts the business. And in hindsight, probably wouldn't have done this. But once I found it out, I didn't quit straight away. I coasted for 3 months. And I was like, I'm annoyed. I want to find something better, but I want to find something genuinely better.
Well, and also, where's your motivation?
It's gone.
Yeah,
exactly.
If you know that the barrier's been put in place and you're not going to get through that.
Yeah.
Why would you bother?
And so I got to the point where I was doing the bare minimum, getting my work done, turning up, but was not going above and beyond anymore. I remember being pulled into a room because they'd spotted it too. And they said, well, we've really noticed that like your productivity and output's really dropped. And at that point in time, I'd actually found another job, and I said, well, I'm probably won't come as a surprise to you, but I'm resigning. They weren't surprised. And what was really interesting is they didn't ask why.
They knew.
So they probably knew. In hindsight, I kind of wish I'd been like, look, I found out that you've been charging me as a senior consultant for 12 to 18 months. It's quite insulting to then be told, oh, I wasn't ready for that.
But I think what you're saying aligns with some research from the American Psychological Association, where they say that quiet quitting is actually a stress response.
That's really
interesting. It's not about being lazy, it's about self-preservation.
I think that's one type of quiet quitting, yeah.
The reality of what you're saying just then is you could have told them this is why, but was that going to change things? Was that going to do anything? Was that really going to make you feel any better? Probably not, and maybe that's a conscious or unconscious decision you made.
Exactly. And I think my experience there, wasn't uncommon, because according to MIT Sloan's management review, there are 3 factors that lead to that kind of disengagement. And I think it was actually a combination of these 3 that I experienced. The first one is a lack of career growth opportunity. And 76% of people say that leads to them feeling disengaged. 68% say feeling undervalued. And 63% say a disconnect between effort and reward.
So it's not really about them not wanting to be there. It's just they don't see the value of going above and beyond, which, how closely do you think that, because we did a few episodes back about lazy girl jobs, where we're seeing this rise of people appreciating balance and, in their work, in their home life a little bit more, and not necessarily wanting to go above and beyond. Do you think that there's any correlation with that?
I think they're two quite separate things, and I think conflating them could be potentially dangerous, because I think there is still a desire to have balance, but in the 8 hours that you're working, you work very hard, you're very, very productive. It's not that quiet quitters are lazy girls.
No, and actually, if you're saying that a lack of growth opportunities is one of the top 3 reasons, then actually that does feel very different from lazy girl jobs, because these are people that want to keep pushing up in their career rather than happy to stay where they are.
I think the psychology behind disengagement is very interesting as well, because I don't think it's as simple as, oh, I think I should be paid X, or I think I should be paid Y, because everybody knows that there is a level of subjectivity to that. Like, everyone wants to be paid more, right?
Yeah, of course.
Everybody wants to be appreciated more. Everybody wants to feel like they have massive career growth opportunities, probably above and beyond what they're currently experiencing. But I think where there's an interesting tension is around the fact that obviously companies can either choose to lean into that and try to reward, recognize, make all of those things happen, and people will still feel disengaged, which is where I think it becomes a bit more like maybe you're expecting too much from your employer. But there are so many companies out there that don't bother even thinking about how they re-engage disengaged employees.
Which there's a financial implication on that, because Deloitte's workplace study has found that companies lose an average of almost $3,500 a year for every disengaged employee.
That's mad.
That soon stacks up, right? So it's not just a case of it being an emotional issue from the employee side. There is business impact.
Yeah. When
you have people in the business that are disengaged, not focused, aren't seeing opportunities, don't feel like they're being rewarded. And to your point, it's not necessarily a financial reward.
Yeah.
It can be things through flexibility, recognition, praise, whatever that could be.
Yeah, feeling listened to, quite simply, as well. Have you ever quiet quit?
Never.
Really?
No.
Would you do anything quietly?
At the episode where we did about fuck ups at work, and I was saying, like, I look back at so much of my career and think the elements where I feel like I fucked up have been based on my like emotional immaturity.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely played out.
Yeah.
Like, there are times where I think I wouldn't, like, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have necessarily left a business in a way, like, not necessarily anything bad.
Yeah.
But I haven't just sloped away.
Yeah.
And mainly because there are a couple of instances where I've really wanted positive change in the business, so I've been quite vocal about that. I've talked about it in an episode before.
Yeah.
So this is a very new avenue for me.
But you can turn it around. And I think what is a common misconception is that this quiet quitting thing is a trend that can't be resolved. And I think that's actually completely incorrect. Employees can go from being very disengaged to re-engaged, but it has to be intentional.
But it's a little bit like in relationships, right? You're not going to be peaking all the time. There'll be elements of like, it'll be mundane or, plodding along.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that there'll be times when you're more or less engaged.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to get to the point where you walk away at the first moment you're disengaged, because you could bring that back up.
But there has to be a desire either to walk away or to decide, I am disengaged and I don't want to go on like this anymore.
I do have an example of that, actually.
Oh.
This was a business I was in quite a few years ago now. I really loved the business, but I was getting really bored in my role. And I'd been there at that point about 3 years. Really loved the company, loved the people I work with. But I was just like, I just don't... I was doing a job even before that I had experience in for quite a while, and I didn't feel creatively fulfilled. So I hit this bottom, and at that point I could have walked away and could have gone somewhere else. But actually I used it to then... I worked with a coach, actually, and it's one of the best things I probably ever did. I used it to work out why I was disengaging. And I was in a sales role, and the bit that was missing was I didn't feel like I was using... I think I'm quite a creative person. I didn't really feel like that was coming through in a lot of the work that I was doing. So with that coach, we looked at pitching a new role for the business that I could, the one I could do, and obviously I'd pitch myself as the person doing that role, but also there was business impact of my role changing and replacing my previous role with someone else and me going into this new role. So we put together a case study for why this new role should be created, what business impact it would make. I then pitched it to the MD and my boss, and they went with it. And I ended up staying another year doing that. I think
that's such a smart thing to do, because companies ultimately don't want to lose good employees. And I think taking ownership on both sides is very, very important. I think there's a common belief, I don't know if it's the right word, but there's a sort of common belief that companies have to make all the effort to keep you and to get the most out of you. Whereas actually there's benefits on two sides of that, right? By you doing that, you stayed in a company that you enjoyed, but also people trusted you already. You were given a career growth opportunity that you probably wouldn't have been given elsewhere by jumping ship. You maintained a relationship with colleagues that you already worked very, very well with, and you got something out of it that you wanted. Yeah, and
I can think of a second experience as well, where I knew that I'd had my second promotion within like space of 7 months, something like that. And so I knew that wasn't on the cards, and I didn't expect to. But I was working in an area that, again, I was familiar with, and I wanted to put myself in, I wanted to work on new projects. So to keep me engaged, I asked to be put on a new project on top of my day job so that I could learn something new, because I didn't want to just be fixed into, Lauren can only do this. So I've never quietly quit. I've just constantly re-engaged myself.
You've just tried to make sure that you don't get to that point.
Yeah, which I think is
it's a really sensible thing to do. We ask so us as founders sit down quarterly with everybody in the business to make sure that they are engaged, happy. And one of the questions that we ask is like, what do you want to do more of or less of? Is your job giving you what you want it to? And we have that conversation. It's actually very interesting, because out of that conversation we've had 2 role changes, 1 complete role change, 1 like shift, 2 title changes. Because that really mattered to 2 people. It wasn't
about their specifics.
It was literally just the title change was what was going to help them to be engaged, which is so interesting. We've had, naturally, you have like salary negotiation conversations out of that. I'd say out of those conversations, probably about 3 or 4 pay rises. But we benchmark pay every year and move people anyway. So those are kind of more natural. And then we've also, interestingly, had location change. So somebody moved to Australia, and we managed to facilitate that, because they were like, my life, I don't want to be in the UK anymore.
So everything you were saying aligns with some research that has come out from the Society of Human Resource Management. They said that 82% of people who successfully re-engaged with their work had to first acknowledge their disengagement openly. And I think the fact that you're creating a space to have those conversations is serving you well in the long run, right? Because all of this stuff, if those people hadn't, may have quietly quit.
Exactly. And that's not, for us, it's not worth it. If we think somebody is worth keeping, they're worth keeping. And it might be in a different role, it might be with a different title, it might be in Australia. But you're going to do everything you can to maintain and keep your good employees, because a business is only as good as the people within it, right? You have to have them, you have to treat them well. And so as much as I obviously said there is an onus on an individual, which you've obviously shown what you can do, there is also an onus on a company to make sure that they are recognising, rewarding, treating people fairly, and creating a genuinely open place to have a discussion.
And I think that's outside of just the annual review. Because I think timing is crucial on that, right? Because if you're having it regularly enough that there's that forum to have that conversation, rather than that point where maybe timing you capture it slightly wrong, where it's at the point where they've really gone through that phase where they really have disengaged, there's no coming back.
Yeah, and I think those kind of catch-ups have to be very, very intentionally structured. So you need a weekly catch-up with your direct manager. You need more common sort of like team-wide catch-ups where you might be catching up with your manager's manager or whoever else is also making decisions. You need to feel like they're approachable ultimately, and I think you need those quarterly or at least pretty frequent proper discussions with people that you feel like can make change for you. And so we've really intentionally designed that kind of communication and that kind of openness to make sure that obviously it doesn't work in every single case, and some people just don't feel comfortable, or they just are like, this isn't for me anymore, which is totally fine. But in most cases, it has meant that we've probably found problems or potential problems before it's actually happened. And I also think because I have quiet quit, I can see the signs of it as well, which is very interesting.
It's interesting to say, as you were talking, I was thinking about someone that I used to manage who, she works with the business maybe 2.5 years, but I think realistically we probably got another year out of her than we would have done if her and I hadn't have had a conversation about where she wanted to take her career, and I was able to, in the job that she was doing, get her onto certain projects that would help develop that skill set. And I think she was one of the most valuable members of the team that I was managing, so I didn't want to lose her.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to extend that life as much as possible, and again, it comes back to what's in it for both parties, and can it make sense to work together for another year or another 2 years or another 3 years, whatever it might be.
A few years ago, I worked with someone who I think they were quietly quitting for about 2 years, and I was just like, just go.
That's a long time.
Yeah. I think the frustration comes when you can see someone doesn't want to be there, but they're not doing anything to re-engage themselves, and they drain you. They're a drain to be around. And in those situations, I wonder what is making someone stay, and do you think it's almost like an attention thing? They just want to be wanted?
I think quiet quitting is quite selfish innately, and that is from somebody that has done it.
Why do you say that?
Because I think there's actually a massive impact of quiet quitting. And again, when I say I have done it, and I don't think I'd have handled it in the same way. Because you're making yourself unhappy if it goes on for long, because no one wants to feel unfulfilled and in a career that they're not enjoying. It's not good for the company, particularly small companies, to have somebody that's just sitting there. But the impact on the team is huge. I'm sure we've all been in teams where there's somebody who's just incredibly negative, complaining all the time, just a complete energy sponge. And I think when people are going through that period of quiet quitting with no desire to change that, you become pretty difficult to be around.
But the irony is, it's not quiet quitting if it's so obvious, is it? Because you know
medium
that,
loud quitting.
But you know that the stat around like only 7% of communication is verbal. If you are picking up through their behaviours, through their body language, all of that, silence can speak volumes.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult for teams to manage. Like if you are a manager trying to manage a bunch of people where one person is completely checked out, obviously we can talk about strategies to try to re-engage people, but if they haven't acknowledged yet that that's something that they want to change, I do think it is upon you to go and change that and to leave, to find another job or to re-engage yourself. I don't think that it's, once you've really reached that like total maximum like break point of like I'm not in this anymore, I do think that is, you have accountability to leave at that point.
But I also think there's something on the manager to, as part of you being a people manager, managing that team, what is your role in that as well? Like, are you having those conversations?
You need to try. But I do think there's only so much one person can do.
Yeah, you're not necessarily going to get blood from a stone if someone isn't open to having those conversations.
Should we talk about some of those strategies after a quick ad break?
Let's. Molly, you know what drives me crazy about marketing agencies? They want to take everything off your plate completely.
Oh my God. And then you're stuck paying huge monthly retainers plus markups on your ad spend, getting reports full of stats that really don't mean anything for your business.
That's why I'm excited about House of Performance. Instead of taking over your performance marketing, they come in and actually coach your in-house team.
And what I love is that they bring all of this agency expertise, but they use it to make your existing team stronger. So you get insights from different industries, real practical support, and your team actually grows their skills instead of just outsourcing everything.
Plus, when you invest in your team like this, they're way more likely to stick around because they feel like they're developing.
If you want to get more out of your marketing without the huge agency fees, then head to houseofperformance.co.uk and mention working on it for a free strategy session with their team. So we were just chatting there, obviously, about people needing to acknowledge when they've been in a state of disengagement. And it reminds me of something called the region beta paradox.
Oh, okay.
It's a phenomenon where somebody will remain in a state of like mild discomfort or something not being quite perfect because being in that state is less scary than not. So somebody will wait until something gets really, really bad in order to act because it's not bad enough to do anything, but it's not good enough to be happy.
That's interesting. So it's a case of better the devil you know.
Yeah,
which we see a lot in we see a lot in relationships, right?
Yeah.
People would rather be with someone they don't like than be on their own. And that's not obviously a blanket rule, but
not with my husband, to clarify.
Because there's this fear of the unknown. Actually, the state of discomfort doesn't feel great, but it's familiar.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's the unfamiliarity that keeps people in those situations.
And there's a lot of natural fear around losing a job, leaving a job, that kind of change. And like starting a new job is stressful, it's unfamiliar. There's a lot of like emotional stress on that. And so I think people taking that plunge can feel very threatening and very uncertain.
I think there's also an element of when it's that mild discomfort, you can almost say, I know I can handle that. Whereas what if I go somewhere else and it's worse? There's always the what if. And I saw something the other day that said, worrying is a misuse of imagination. Because actually you should switch it and go, if you're going to worry and go, what if it's worse? What if it's better? What if you don't have to feel like this every day when you go to work?
And actually put that into action.
Yeah.
But I think, that comes back to us talking about the onus has to be on the individual, not to find the solution necessarily, but to acknowledge that the region beta or the state of disengagement is not sustainable.
Yeah. I think there's a really nice exercise you can do if you're feeling like you're disengaged, is look through your calendar or over the last few weeks and look at those moments where you felt joy and look at those moments where you felt dread or uncomfortable, and are there patterns? So is it the recurring pattern is when you're in a meeting with a certain person, that's when you feel it, or the recurring theme is when you are talking about this subject or working on this project, you're really disengaging, and try and identify those because it go on.
It just made me think of I once quit a job.
Go on.
Because I didn't want to do a certain spreadsheet.
That can't have been the only reason.
It was literally the only reason.
What?
So it was. So I identified that I was about to disengage. I was at a company. I loved so many bits of my job. It was the job where I was talking on the news all the time. And there were a number of things to it that led to this, but effectively I had lost a member of my team because they got made redundant because they said that they didn't have enough budget to keep more people. So this task then got handed to me, and as an additional massive project. And it was a spreadsheet that was analysing the square footage of convenience stores all over the UK. And I was going to have to crunch all of this data, all of these numbers, publish a report on it with something that I had zero interest in. So I put it off and put it off and put it off until I actually had to do something about it, and I quit.
This is the same job where you were told interesting outfit choice, right?
Yes.
So
it was a
your answer
roller coaster.
Just bail.
I literally quit. And in hindsight, I should have just said, I am going to quit unless you take the spreadsheet off me. My very immature 24-year-old brain decided to quit.
If you want a more immature response from that, I have one for you.
Okay.
When I was 17, I had a job selling double glazing and like a sales in the call centre.
I see you doing that.
And, well, that was exactly the point. I didn't do it. I called the talking clock because I was too scared to call someone. So when you talk about quitting a job because you don't like a specific task, I didn't like calling people, which in a call centre isn't great. So my quiet quitting was just I didn't go back one day. I did the job for about 2
Just
weeks
ran away.
and I was like so fundamentally, maybe less so disengaged, more just scared and also terrible, that my quiet quitting was just slowly sloping off out the door one day and never returning.
And I think that's, those kind of things, like me quitting because of a spreadsheet, you calling a talking clock every day, those kind of things can be picked up by managers, and people should be intentional and aware of it.
I mean, I would say anyone that was overseeing me, realising I was making
should have known.
Yeah. But 2 weeks, I wasn't there long enough to realise how catastrophically bad I was for that business.
There's an interesting stat on how important regular one-to-ones are. So Google's Project Oxygen found that employees who have very regular one-to-ones are 67% more likely to be engaged.
Oh, I like that.
It's really interesting.
I really value one-to-ones. I think they are. I really find it frustrating when I speak to people and they talk about their managers cancelling their one-to-ones, showing up late, using the one-to-one for the manager to kind of bang on about something. Whereas I think whenever I've managed teams before, I've always protected that one-to-one time. So I will move things and prioritise that so my team know that whatever happens that week, they have that time for me and it's their time to use how they wish.
Yeah.
I feel like that makes sense, that research.
Yeah, I think you feel invested in, you feel like your manager genuinely cares, and also you can raise things such as, I'd love to be more involved in that project, I heard this is going on. And naturally then you're trying to keep yourself engaged.
Yes, yeah. And use that time well. So yes, you might talk about things you're working on, challenges you're facing, but actually keep those 5 minutes at the end for things that have been playing on your mind that now's the time to go through them.
And I think this idea of engagement, or re-engagement anyway, in a very new world of work when it comes to flexibility, when it comes to ideas like work-life integration, work-life balance, whatever it might be, I think there are increasingly more ways to re-engage people depending on the priorities in their life, right? So if somebody's a top performer but they're like, oh, I'm really seeking a bit more balance, or I'm really seeking I want to go and work 4 days a week somewhere, or I want to have a bit of a side hustle, I've got this project that I want to do. There are so many ways outside of work that companies can benefit from an engagement perspective. It doesn't just have to be at work all the time. Can I give you another project? Can I make sure that the one-to-ones don't get cancelled? It can also be, do we need to shift up your work week? Do we need to give you some unpaid leave if you want to go and travel around the world, sabbaticals, whatever it might be?
How many businesses do you think, this is like a needle in a haystack, but are quite open to that? Because I wonder if the people that are quiet quitting, are they working at places where
those conversations aren't happening? I think so. I think companies that are at the forefront of flexibility and are at the forefront of employee engagement are making it more normal. And I don't think there's a common thread. I think some people say, well, startups are better at it than large corporates. I'd actually disagree with that. I think there are a lot of people very intentionally building cultures that are based on employee engagement and that two-way conversation and that give and take idea.
Yeah.
And I do think that they will be the companies that win from a retention perspective and from a talent attraction perspective, is looking at beyond just the job. It is how do your work and your life interact to benefit each other and overall make people happy. Should we look at a real life scenario from one of our listeners?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I used to be the person who volunteered for everything at work. But after being passed over for promotion twice, I found myself doing the bare minimum. I don't want to feel this way, but I can't seem to find that enthusiasm anymore. How do I rebuild my engagement without feeling like I'm setting myself up for disappointment all over again? Very familiar feeling.
My first question there would be, I would assume, hopefully, they have an understanding of why they were passed over for
You'd hope
promotion.
So. And have they been given like actionable strategies and tips that they can work on? Because if not, I'd start looking for something else.
If they have been given some actionable feedback, I would focus your energy on working on that rather than volunteering to do more.
Yes, I think that's really good advice.
Thank you. It's first of all, good bit of advice I'll give this whole episode.
I think also you need to ask yourself, if you have been given those strategies and that kind of pathway to get to promotion, if that isn't fueling your engagement, you need to think why. Like, is it that you're being told something that you don't feel is achievable? Is it that you're being told something that feels like a bit of a cop-out and actually isn't the reason that you haven't been promoted? Or does it feel like you're kind of being placated and just kept waiting for a promotion. You need to ask why those things, like, is it emotional maturity? Is it certain skill sets? Like those things in and of itself, you would expect, if it's been a two-way discussion, for that to fuel somebody's engagement.
Yeah, especially if you've been passed up, there has to have been that. If they are being placated or feeling like they're being placated and kind of pushed back a little bit, I think we covered this in a previous episode. It's weighing up whether it's worth sticking around for.
Exactly. And I do think, again, if it were me and I'd been passed over for promotion twice and I was feeling really disengaged, I would maybe take that as a sign that it wasn't the right place for me and that I need to go and take that into my own hands and go and find some career happiness again.
Yeah, I think so. Good advice, Mol. Molly, should we do a little quick fire round?
Oh, I love these.
I've done one of these in ages. Okay, let's do this. Let's play a game of rating these signs of whether you're ready to re-engage at work.
Okay.
You're starting to feel curious about projects again.
Nice. Yeah, I'd give that a high rating, like a 7 out of 10, because your natural curiosity is going to be a big sign of being interested, right?
Oh, nice. Okay.
You're bothered by problems that you previously ignored.
Oh, okay. And maybe like an 8 shows you're starting to invest emotionally again.
And to try to make something better.
Yeah, I like that. You're willing to speak up in meetings again.
Yes, that would be a really high one. I think that's like a 9 out of 10. Shows you care about how you're being perceived and that you're feeling psychological safety.
Yeah, nice.
You're interested in mentoring others.
Oh, that's a strong 10.
That's going to be the biggest one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real sign that you're invested back into the business. You're engaged. You really want to, give help and support to others. Love that one.
That's also one that we haven't covered. I think that's a brilliant method of re-engagement as well. Is that like mentoring or potential like clear management pathway or whatever it might be? Because I do think a lot of people genuinely value management or mentoring in terms of getting career fulfillment.
Which actually maybe the listener story that we mentioned, when they're saying they're volunteering for everything, is there some support to help others?
Yeah, because they have a mentor.
Yeah. We need to do an episode on mentoring. I think I've got a whole load to say about that.
I have nothing to say, so you go for it.
I'll carry that one. Molly, I feel like I've learned quite a lot into this episode, because coming into it, I was like, I've never quietly quit, but what I have done is re-engage to stop myself getting to the
and
point
run away before you quietly quit.
Whereas you're like, fuck it, I'm out the door. And actually, I think what we've seen is with some healthy conversations, some kind of action support, you can get to the point where you come back into the business, engaged, ready to stay a little bit further.
I think your dating analogy was actually quite a pertinent one, because if you think about going through that lull and then re-engaging, apparently 71% of employees report higher job satisfaction after going through that dip and then coming back out stronger. And I think that's quite similar in relationships, right? If you've actually worked through something and you've come back out the other side, you're stronger for it.
Yeah, that 7-year itch is A-OK. If you want to share your own re-engagement story or ask us any questions, reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at workingonit.pod or email us hello@workingonit.show.
Next time on the podcast, we're working on toxic bosses.
Oh, we're talking about you. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep working on it.